Little did my greedy relatives know that the modest woman they'd dismissed and ignored for years was about to make them eat their words from beyond the grave. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Pemberton Associates law firm as 24-year-old Marcus Thompson sat uncomfortably in the burgundy leather chair, his worn jeans and thrift store button-down making him feel completely out of place among the mahogany furniture and expensive artwork. He kept checking his phone, wondering if he should even be here at all. Marcus had always been the black sheep of the Thompson family, while his cousins Bradley and Victoria went to private schools and summer camps in the Hamptons. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus grew up in a small apartment with his single mother, working part-time jobs since he was 16 to help make ends meet. When his grandmother, Eleanor Thompson, passed away 3 months ago at 92, he was the only family member who genuinely mourned her loss rather than immediately calculating what they might inherit. The past week had been particularly brutal. Ever since the family received the call about today's will reading, Marcus had endured a constant stream of sneering comments and barely concealed contempt from his relatives. They'd made it crystal clear that they considered him an unwelcome intruder at what they saw as their private windfall distribution. "I still don't understand why Marcus even needs to be here," Bradley had said loudly at the funeral reception, his prep school accent dripping with disdain. Grandma Eleanor barely knew him. He visited maybe twice a year, if that. Victoria, Bradley's sister and the family's self-appointed social coordinator, had been even more direct. "Honestly, it's embarrassing. Look at him. He can't even afford a proper suit for Grandma's funeral. What could she possibly have left him?" Her collection of costume jewelry. Their parents, Marcus's Uncle Richard and Aunt Patricia, had simply smiled and nodded, their silence speaking volumes about their own assumption. The entire Thompson clan had always treated Marcus and his mother like poor relations to be barely tolerated at family gatherings, useful for filling out Christmas photos, but otherwise irrelevant to the family's serious business. Marcus's mother, Linda, had tried to shield him from the worst of it over the years, but Eleanor Thompson had been different. Despite what Bradley claimed, Marcus had visited his grandmother regularly, especially after his mother died in a car accident 2 years ago. Those quiet Sunday afternoons in Eleanor's modest downtown apartment had meant everything to him during his darkest period of grief. While his cousins saw a frail old woman living in a small apartment filled with outdated furniture, Marcus had discovered someone fascinating. Eleanor would tell him stories about her late husband's work as an engineer, her own career as a chemistry teacher before women were encouraged in science, and the small investments she'd made over the decade. She never talked about money directly, but Marcus sensed there was more to his grandmother's financial situation than her humble lifestyle suggested. "Most people see what they expect to see," Eleanor had told him just 6 months before her death, her sharp blue eyes twinkling with something that might have been amusement. "They look at my little apartment and my second-hand furniture and think they understand everything about me, but appearances can be deceiving. Marcus, remember that." Now, sitting in this intimidating law office, Marcus wondered if he'd imagined the knowing look in her eyes when she'd said those words. Around him, the rest of the Thompson family filled the other chairs with barely contained excitement. Uncle Richard kept checking his expensive watch and muttering about his afternoon golf game, while Aunt Patricia repeatedly opened and closed her designer purse, as if practicing for the moment she'd need to store some valuable document. Bradley lounged in his chair with the casual confidence of someone who'd never doubted that good things would come his way. At 28, he worked at an investment firm where his father had connections, drove a BMW his parents had bought him, and lived in a downtown loft they subsidized. Victoria, 26 and fresh from her MBA program, sat with perfect posture and a legal pad, apparently ready to take notes on her inheritance. The law office door opened and a distinguished man in his 60s entered, carrying a thick manila folder. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Gerald Pemberton, Mrs. Thompson's attorney. Thank you all for coming today." Marcus noticed how Bradley and Victoria immediately straightened up, their casual arrogance shifting into what they probably thought was respectful attention. Uncle Richard nodded gravely, as if he were attending a board meeting rather than his mother's will reading. "Before we begin, Mr. Pemberton said, settling behind his desk. I want you to know that Mrs. Thompson was very specific about how she wanted this handled. She spent considerable time ensuring that her wishes would be crystal clear and legally bulletproof. The family members exchanged glances that mixed excitement with just a hint of nervousness. Marcus caught Bradley smirking in his direction, a look that clearly said, "This won't take long for you." Mrs. Thompson's estate, Mr. Pemberton continued, is somewhat more complex than you might expect. She was a very thoughtful woman who believed in surprising people. As the lawyer opened the folder and began shuffling through documents, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his grandmother's voice was somehow echoing in the room, carrying that same mysterious amusement he'd heard in her apartment months ago. The Thompson family was about to learn that Eleanor Thompson had indeed been full of surprises, and that their assumptions about both the inheritance and about Marcus were about to be shattered completely. Pemberton looked up from the documents, his expression neutral but his eyes holding just a hint of anticipation. "Shall we begin?" Mr. Pemberton adjusted his reading glasses and cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the suddenly silent room. Marcus could feel the tension radiating from his relatives as they leaned forward in their chairs, barely able to contain their anticipation. The lawyer's fingers drummed once against the mahogany desk before he began. "The last will and testament of Eleanor Margaret Thompson," he announced formally, "written in her own hand, and witnessed according to all legal requirements of the state." Uncle Richard shifted impatiently in his chair. "Gerald, we've known each other for 15. Can we skip the formalities and get to the distributions?" Mr. Pemberton's expression remained professionally neutral, but Marcus caught a slight tightening around his eyes. Mrs. Thompson was very specific about how this should be conducted. She wanted certain things said in a particular order. Victoria exchanged a knowing look with Bradley, both of them clearly thinking this was just typical lawyer theatrics, designed to justify billable hours. Marcus, however, remembered his grandmother's love of precision and attention to detail. If she'd specified an order, there was definitely a reason. Eleanor Thompson accumulated her wealth quietly over many decades, Mr. Pemberton continued, consulting the documents. She lived modestly, invested wisely, and made very deliberate choices about her legacy. Aunt Patricia leaned forward eagerly. "How much are we talking about exactly?" "The total estate," Mr. Pemberton said, pausing for effect, "is valued at approximately $2.8 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Bradley's casual slouch disappeared as he sat bolt upright. Victoria actually dropped her pen, the small sound seeming loud in the shocked quiet. Uncle Richard's mouth fell open slightly before he quickly composed himself. "2.8 million?" Aunt Patricia whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus felt his own shock ripple through him. His grandmother, who'd lived in a small apartment and shopped with coupons, who'd worn the same winter coat for 20 years and drove a 15-year-old Honda Civic, had been worth nearly $3 million. "Now," Pemberton continued, his voice cutting through their amazement, "let's discuss the specific bequests." Mrs. Thompson had very particular wishes about how her estate should be distributed. Bradley recovered first, his prep school confidence reasserting itself. "Well, obviously the bulk of it should be divided among the primary heirs. Dad, Aunt Linda's portion would go to Marcus the Foes, and Victoria and I would receive our shares as grandchildren." "Actually," Mr. Pemberton said mildly, "Miss Thompson had quite different ideas about fairness and worthiness." He pulled out a handwritten letter, Eleanor's distinctive cursive visible even from across the desk. She wrote personal explanations for her decisions. "Would you like me to read her reason?" "Just get to the numbers," Uncle Richard said brusquely, though Marcus noticed his hands were trembling slightly. Mr. Pemberton nodded and consulted a different document. "To my son Richard Thompson, who has always believed that success is measured in dollars and that family obligations end at social convenience, I leave the sum of $10,000. This should be sufficient to cover the cost of a nice vacation, which I recommend you take to reflect on whether money truly brings happiness." The color drained from Uncle Richard's face. 10,000? That's it? There must be some mistake. To my daughter-in-law Patricia Thompson, Miss Pemberton continued without acknowledging the interruption, who has spent 30 years making sure I understood my place in the family hierarchy. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I leave my jewelry collection and $5,000 to have it appraised. I think you'll find its value reflects the genuine affection you've shown me over the years. Aunt Patricia's designer purse slipped from her nerveless fingers. $5,000 in some old jewelry? Gerald, this is ridiculous. Eleanor must have been suffering from dementia when she wrote this. Mrs. Thompson underwent a complete psychological evaluation just 3 months before her death, Mr. Pemberton said calmly. She was declared to be of completely sound mind and judgment. The evaluation is part of the legal record. Victoria found her voice, though it came out as a squeak. What about Bradley and me? We're her grandchildren. Mr. Pemberton consulted the will again. To my grandson Bradley Thompson, who has never visited me unless his parents forced him to, and who once told his friends at my 80th birthday party that he was stuck babysitting the old lady, I leave $1,000 and a suggestion that he use it to buy a book on empathy. Bradley's face turned red. That's not. I never said. This is character assassination. To my granddaughter Victoria Thompson, the lawyer continued implacably, who calculated the value of my apartment and furniture within 20 minutes of her last visit, and asked her mother if I'd finally updated my will. I leave $1,000 and my collection of chemistry textbooks. Perhaps she can learn something about the value of knowledge over money. Victoria was staring at the lawyer in horror. $1,000 each? That's insane. We're family, we have rights. You certainly do, Mr. Pemberton agreed. You have the right to contest the will, though I should mention that Mrs. Thompson anticipated this possibility. Any heir who challenges this will in court automatically forfeits their inheritance entirely, and their portion is added to the primary beneficiary's trust fund. Marcus sat in stunned silence as his relatives erupted in protests and accusations. The primary beneficiary? The trust fund? His mind was reeling as he tried to process what was happening. Uncle Richard was on his feet now, his face purple with rage. This is preposterous. My mother was clearly manipulated. Someone must have influenced her against her own family. Mr. Pemberton's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Perhaps you'd like to hear what Mrs. Thompson wrote about the primary beneficiary. The room fell silent again, all eyes turning to the lawyer as he lifted another document. This, he said, looking directly at Marcus, is where things get very interesting. Pemberton lifted the final document, and Marcus noticed his grandmother's handwriting was even more careful on this page, as if she'd taken extra time with every word. The lawyer's eyes met Marcus's across the desk, and for the first time that morning, his professional mask slipped into something that might have been a smile. To my grandson Marcus Thompson, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence, who was the only member of my family to visit me not out of obligation, but out of genuine love. Marcus felt his heart stop. Around him, his relatives were frozen in their chairs, their earlier protest dying in their throats as they realized what was about to happen. Marcus, Mr. Pemberton continued, reading Eleanor's words, you are the only one who ever asked me about my life, my work, my dream. You listened to my stories about your grandfather's engineering projects and my chemistry research. You brought me books from the library, and sat with me during my pneumonia last winter when everyone else was too busy to visit. Uncle Richard's voice came out as a strangled whisper. No, this isn't happening. You never looked at my small apartment and shabby furniture with judgment. The lawyer read on. You saw me. While others calculated what I might be worth, you valued who I was. This is why I'm leaving you something they never expect. Bradley lurched forward in his chair. Whatever it is, we can contest this. There are laws about fair distribution. Mr. Pemberton held up a hand. I haven't finished reading yet. His voice carried a warning that made even Bradley sink back. Marcus, what I'm about to tell your family will shock them, because they never bothered to truly know me. The lawyer paused, looking directly at Marcus. Your grandmother continued her chemistry research long after she retired from teaching. She held patents on 3 different industrial processes that have been generating royalties for over 30 years. She also made extremely shrewd investments in tech companies before most people knew what the internet was. Victoria's face had gone ashen. Patents? What The small apartment they all pitied was a choice. Mr. Pemberton continued reading. I could have lived anywhere, but I preferred to live simply and invest wisely. Every dollar your cousins spent on designer clothes and expensive cars, I put into stocks, bonds, and real estate. While they were learning to be consumers, I was building wealth. Aunt Patricia's voice cracked. Real estate, Pemberton explained, setting aside the letter temporarily. Owned rental properties in 3 states, a portfolio of blue-chip stocks, government bonds, and the patents Mr. Marcus just mentioned. Her modest lifestyle generated approximately $180,000 per year in passive income, which she reinvested religiously. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears as the magnitude of his grandmother's secret life began to sink in. Miss Pemberton returned to Eleanor's letter. Marcus, I watched your cousins grow up expecting everything to be handed to them. I watched your uncle and his wife treat kindness as weakness and generosity as entitlement. But you, my dear boy, worked 2 jobs to put yourself through community college. You took care of your mother during her illness. You visited me not because you wanted something but because you cared. Uncle Richard was shaking his head repeatedly, as if he could make the words disappear. This is impossible. Mother lived like she had nothing. Because she was smart, Miss Pemberton said firmly, then returned to the will. Marcus, I'm establishing a trust fund in your name with the remainder of my estate. After legal fees and the small bequest to other family members, you will inherit approximately $2.3 million. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Victoria actually gasped, a sharp intake of breath that seemed to suck all the oxygen from the space. Bradley's face cycled through disbelief, rage, and something that might have been panic. 2.3 million, Marcus whispered, the number feeling impossible in his mouth. The trust is structured to provide you with both immediate access to funds for education and long-term financial security, Mr. Pemberton explained. Your grandmother wanted to ensure you could finish your degree without working 3 jobs, but also that you'd have the foundation to build your own wealth responsibly. Eleanor's letter wasn't finished. Marcus, I know this will upset the family, but I need you to understand something they never did. Wealth isn't just about money, it's about character. You have spent your life proving that you understand the difference between having value and being valuable. They never learned that lesson. Uncle Richard found his voice, though it came out as a roar. This is theft. We're his relatives. We have rights. Actually, Mr. Pemberton said calmly, you have exactly what Mrs. Thompson felt you deserved based on 30 years of observed behavior. She wrote one final message, the lawyer continued, for those who might question her judgment. He lifted another document, this one clearly written in Eleanor's shaking hand from her final week. To my family members who are undoubtedly shocked by these distributions, you are reaping exactly what you have sown. For 30 years, you treated me like an obligation, Marcus like an embarrassment, and kindness like a transaction. This will reflect the love and respect you each showed me during my lifetime. Bradley was on his feet now, his prep school composure completely shattered. We'll sue, we'll prove she was incompetent. Feel free to try, Mr. Pemberton said mildly. But remember, any challenge to this will result in complete forfeiture of your inheritances. Mrs. Thompson was very clear about that. The lawyer began gathering the documents. Mrs. Thompson also left one final instruction. He looked at Marcus with something approaching warmth. She said to tell you that she's proud of the man you've become, and that she hopes you'll use this gift to help others the way you helped her. Marcus sat in stunned silence, as his relatives erupted in accusations and threats around him, their true nature finally revealed in all its ugly glory. His grandmother had seen it all, planned for it all, and from beyond the grave had just changed his life forever. The quiet woman they'd all underestimated had just delivered the most devastating lesson of their lives. The chaos in Mr. Pemberton's office reached a fever pitch as the reality of Eleanor's will sank in. Uncle Richard was pacing behind his chair, his expensive suit wrinkled from gripping the fabric in frustration. Aunt Patricia sat rigid, her perfectly applied makeup now streaked with tears of rage and disbelief. "This is insane," Bradley shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "Marcus doesn't deserve this. He's nobody, he works at a grocery store, and lives in a studio apartment." Victoria was frantically taking notes on her legal pad, as if she could somehow lawyer her way out of the situation. There has to be a precedent for undue influence. Elderly people are vulnerable to manipulation. "You can prove nothing," Miss Pemberton interrupted firmly, his patience finally wearing thin. Mrs. Thompson left extensive documentation of her mental state, her reasoning, and her observations of each family member's behavior over the past 30 years. She even kept a journal. He opened his desk drawer and withdrew a thick, leather-bound book. "Would you like me to read some entries?" October 15, 2019. "Richard called today asking if I needed help with my finances. When I told him I was managing fine, he seemed disappointed rather than relieved." Or perhaps November 3, 2020. "Victoria visited and spent 20 minutes photographing my apartment. She told her mother later that I was living like a pauper, and it was embarrassing to the family name." Aunt Patricia's face flushed red. "She was spying on us." "She was observing her family," Mr. Pemberton corrected. "The same family that assumed she was poor, stupid, and irrelevant." Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out barely above a whisper. "Mr. Pemberton, I don't understand. Why didn't she tell me?" The lawyer's expression softened as he turned to Marcus. "She wanted to see who you really were without the influence of money. She told me once that wealth reveals character. It doesn't create it. You proved your character when you had nothing to gain from it." Uncle Richard slammed his hand on the desk. "This is ridiculous. He's 24 years old. What does he know about managing that kind of money? He'll blow it all within a year." "Actually," Mr. Pemberton said, consulting another document. Mrs. Thompson anticipated that concern as well. "The trust is structured with certain protections. Marcus will receive full access to funds for education, housing, and reasonable living expenses immediately. The remainder will be released in stages as he demonstrates financial responsibility." He handed Marcus a thick fold. "Your grandmother also arranged for you to meet with her financial advisor next week. She wanted to ensure you understood the responsibility that comes with this inheritance." Bradley was staring at Marcus with undisguised hatred. "You manipulated her. You must have—" Sweet little Marcus, playing the devoted grandson while you were really after her money. For the first time that day, Marcus felt a spark of anger. He stood up slowly, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "You want to know what I did to manipulate Grandma Eleanor? I listened to her stories about Grandpa's engineering work. I brought her groceries when she had the flu. I sat with her for 8 hours in the emergency room last winter when she fell and broke her wrist." His voice grew stronger. "I asked her about her life because I was interested, not because I wanted something. I brought her books because she loved to read, not because I was building a case for inheritance. And when she told me stories about her chemistry research, I paid attention because I respected her intelligence, not because I thought it would pay off someday." Victoria scoffed. "How convenient that your genuine love just happened to be worth—" Marcus turned to face her directly. "You know what's really convenient, Victoria? That all of you are showing exactly the character that Grandma Eleanor described in her will. Even now, facing the consequences of 30 years of treating her badly, you're more concerned about the money than about the fact that you hurt someone who loved you." The room fell silent. Even Uncle Richard stopped pacing. Mr. Pemberton cleared his throat. "If there are no further questions about the legal aspects of the will, I think we can conclude this meeting. Marcus, I'll need you to stay for a few minutes to sign some documents." Bradley stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This isn't over. We'll contest this. We'll hire the best lawyers money can buy." "With what money?" Marcus asked quietly. "You just inherited $1,000 each, assuming you don't contest the will and lose everything." As the family filed out, their earlier excitement replaced by bitter defeat, Aunt Patricia stopped at the door. "You've destroyed this family, Marcus. I hope you're proud of yourself." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "I didn't destroy anything, Aunt Patricia. I'm just the one who inherited the consequences of choices you all made long before I was even born." After they left, the office felt peaceful for the first time that day. Mr. Pemberton began organizing the documents Marcus would need to sign. "Your grandmother left you one more thing," he said, pulling out a sealed envelope. "She wanted you to read this when we were alone." Marcus's hands shook slightly as he opened the envelope. Eleanor's handwriting filled a single page. "My dearest Marcus, if you're reading this, then you've just witnessed your family's true nature. I'm sorry you had to see that, but I needed you to understand what kind of people they really are. You've spent your life trying to bridge the gap between your branch of the family and theirs, but some gaps exist for good reasons. This money isn't a reward, it's a responsibility. Use it to build the life you want, not the life others expect from you. Help people who deserve it, the way you helped me, and remember that wealth means nothing if you lose your character to obtain it. I love you and I'm proud of the man you've become. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. P.S. Your grandfather would have loved you of his kindness and my stubbornness. Use both wisely." Marcus wiped his eyes and looked up to find Mr. Pemberton watching him with a gentle smile. "She was quite a woman, your grandmother." "Yes," Marcus said, folding the letter carefully. "She really." Outside the law office windows, the afternoon sun was shining brightly on a world that had just become full of possibilities Marcus had never dared to imagine. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Marcus's new apartment as he sat at his kitchen table, reviewing financial reports with Eleanor's former advisor, Margaret Chen. The modest two-bedroom place wasn't extravagant, but it was clean, comfortable, and most importantly, it was his. No more struggling to make rent, no more choosing between groceries and textbooks. "Your grandmother would be proud," Margaret said, closing the portfolio folder. "Most people your age would have blown through half the principal by now, but you've actually grown the trust fund by 12%. Marcus smiled, thinking about the business degree he was now pursuing full-time at the state university. She always said wealth was about making smart choices, not big purchases. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of changes, legal proceedings, and most unexpectedly, media attention. The story of Eleanor Thompson's posthumous justice had somehow leaked to local news, then social media, and eventually went viral. Grandma Eleanor became a trending hashtag, with thousands of people sharing their own stories about family members who'd been underestimated or mistreated. Marcus's phone buzzed with another interview request, this time from a national morning show. He declined, as he had all the others. This wasn't about fame, it was about honoring his grandmother's memory and using her gift responsibly. The legal challenges from his relatives had fizzled out quickly. Uncle Richard had hired an expensive attorney, but after reviewing Eleanor's extensive documentation and psychological evaluations, even the lawyer had advised them to drop the case. The no contest clause would have stripped them of their small inheritances entirely, and they'd already proven Eleanor's assessment of their character with their public tantrum at the will reading. That tantrum had cost them in other ways too. Word had spread through their social circles about how they'd treated Eleanor and reacted to the will reading. Uncle Richard had been quietly asked to resign from 2 charity boards, and Aunt Patricia found herself uninvited from several social events. Their friends began seeing them differently, wondering what kind of people could treat an elderly family member so poorly. Bradley had been the most bitter about the outcome. He'd taken to social media, posting angry rants about unfair distribution of family wealth and manipulation of the elderly. The posts had backfired spectacularly when several of his college friends responded with their own memories of him mocking his grandmother at family gatherings. His reputation at the investment firm where he worked had taken such a hit that he'd eventually been let go during a restructure. She'd made a few public comments about respecting grandmother's wishes, while privately fuming about the lost inheritance. She'd even reached out to Marcus once, suggesting they put this behind us and have dinner. Marcus had politely declined, remembering Eleanor's journal entries about Victoria's calculated attempts at reconciliation whenever she needed something. The knock on Marcus's door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it to find Mrs. Rodriguez from downstairs holding a casserole dish and bean. "Mijo, I made extra arroz con pollo," she said, pressing the dish into his hands, "and I wanted to thank you again for what you did for my grandson." Marcus smiled warmly. Mrs. Rodriguez's grandson Diego had been struggling to afford his EMT training program. When Marcus learned about it, he'd quietly paid the remaining tuition through Eleanor's education fund, one of the charitable initiatives he'd established with part of his inheritance. "Diego earned it with his hard work," Marcus replied. "The scholarship just removed the financial barrier." After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Marcus returned to his laptop where he'd been working on another project Eleanor would have appreciated. He was developing a mentorship program that paired struggling college students with successful professionals, focusing on character development rather than just academic achievement. The program was inspired by his grandmother's belief that true success came from who you were, not what you owned. His phone rang, displaying a number he recognized but hadn't heard from in months. "Uncle Richard." "Hello, Uncle Richard," Marcus said cautiously. "Marcus," his uncle's voice was subdued, lacking its usual commanding tone. I wanted to talk to you about something." "Okay, your aunt and I have been having some financial difficulties. The legal fees and some investments that didn't pan out." Richard's voice trailed off. "I was wondering if you might consider a loan, family helping family." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, thinking about how his grandmother would have handled this. "Uncle Richard, do you remember what you said at the will reading? About how I didn't deserve the inheritance because I was nobody?" "Marcus, I was upset. I said things I didn't mean." "Did you mean them when you said them?" Another long silence. Yes, I suppose I did." "Then you were being honest about how you really felt about me." "I appreciate honesty, Uncle Richard. It's something Grandma Eleanor valued too." "So you won't help?" Marcus looked at Eleanor's portrait on his mantelpiece, the one photo where she was smiling broadly, taken during one of their Sunday afternoon visits. "I'll help the same way you helped Grandma Eleanor all those years. I'll send a card on your birthday and ask how you're doing at Christmas." The line went quiet, then Richard hung up without another word. Margaret Chen gathered her papers and prepared to leave. "Your grandmother set up this trust to change your life, but I think she knew you'd use it to change other lives too." After she left, Marcus walked to his balcony and looked out over the city. In his wallet, he still carried Eleanor's letter, now creased from frequent reading. Her words about responsibility and character had become his daily reminder. His phone buzzed with a text from Diego Rodriguez. "Got the job. Start Monday at City General Hospital. Thank you for believing in me." Marcus smiled, hearing his grandmother's voice in his memory. "Real wealth isn't about what you accumulate, Marcus. It's about what you contribute." 6 months ago, he'd walked into that law office thinking he was nobody special. Today, he understood that Eleanor had seen something in him that even he hadn't recognized: the potential to use power wisely and wealth generously. She'd given him more than money. She'd given him the chance to become the man she'd always believed he could be. And that inheritance was worth far more than two. The autumn leaves rustled in the breeze as Marcus stood before Eleanor's gravestone, a simple granite marker that read, "Eleanor Margaret Thompson, beloved grandmother, teacher and friend." In his hands, he held a thick folder containing financial reports, scholarship recipient letters and photos from the mentorship program that now bore her name. "Happy birthday, Grandma," he said quietly, placing a bouquet of her favorite chrysanthemums beside the headstone. "I brought you an update on how we've been using your gift." A year had passed since that shocking day in Mr. Pemberton's office, and the ripple effects of Eleanor's final lesson continued to spread far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Marcus had just come from the annual board meeting of the Eleanor Thompson Foundation, where they'd reviewed their first year of operation. The foundation had awarded scholarships to 37 students from low-income families, not based on perfect grades, but on demonstrated character, resilience, and commitment to helping others. Each recipient was paired with a mentor and received not just financial support, but guidance on navigating the challenges that came with being the first in their family to pursue higher education. Marcus's phone contained dozens of messages from scholarship recipients. Maria Santos, whose single mother worked 3 jobs, was now pre-med at the State University. James Walker, who'd aged out of foster care, was studying social work with plans to help other foster children. Rachel Kim, whose family had lost their business during the pandemic, was pursuing a degree in public administration with dreams of running for city council. "They all remind me of you, Grandma," Marcus said to the gravestone. "They're proving that circumstances don't define character." The success stories weren't limited to the scholarship program. The Eleanor Thompson Mentorship Initiative had expanded to include professional development workshops, financial literacy classes, and a support network that helped participants long after they graduate. What had started as Marcus's way of honoring his grandmother's memory had become a model that other communities were beginning to replicate. The sound of footsteps on the gravel path made Marcus turn. To his surprise, he saw Victoria approaching, looking uncertain and much less polished than he remembered. Her usual designer clothes had been replaced with a simple dress and cardigan, and her perfectly styled hair was pulled back in a humble ponytail. "Marcus," she said hesitantly, "I hope you don't mind. I saw your car in the parking lot and thought, well, I wanted to visit her too." Marcus studied his cousin's face, noting the genuine nervousness there. "Of course, she was your grandmother too." Victoria approached the grave slowly, carrying a single white rose. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about what she wrote in the will, and what she said about us." She placed the rose next to Marcus's chrysanthemums. "She was right about me, about all of us." They stood in silence for a moment before Victoria continued. "I want you to know that I've been volunteering at a literacy program downtown, teaching adults to read. It's not much, but," she paused, her voice catching slightly, "Grandma always said education was the greatest gift you could give someone. I never understood what she meant until I started helping people who never had the chances I took for granted." Marcus felt a flicker of the hope Eleanor would have wanted him to feel. "That's wonderful, Victoria. She would be proud of that." "I also wanted to apologize," Victoria said, turning to face him. "Not just for how I acted at the will reading, but for how I treated you our whole lives, and how we all treated her. I can't undo that, but I wanted you to know that I understand now why she made the choices she did." "What changed?" Marcus asked gently. Victoria smiled sadly. "Losing everything I thought mattered. The social status, the easy money, the assumption that success would just happen because of who my family was. When all that disappeared, I had to figure out who I actually was underneath it all." She gestured toward the foundation folder in Marcus's hands. "I've been following what you've been doing, the foundation, the scholarships. You're carrying on everything she believed in." Marcus felt a familiar warmth, the same feeling he'd gotten during those Sunday afternoons with Eleanor when they'd talk about how to make the world a little better. "She always said that wealth was meant to be shared, not hoarded." "I know this might be presumptuous," Victoria said carefully, "but I was wondering if there might be a way for me to get involved with the foundation. Not in any leadership role, obviously, but maybe helping with the mentorship program. I have my MBA, and I could help teach some of the financial literacy workshops." Marcus considered her offer, hearing Eleanor's voice in his memory. "People can change, Marcus, but only when they're ready to do the hard work of becoming better. The foundation could use someone with your business background," he said finally, "but it would mean starting at the bottom, working directly with participants, proving yourself through service rather than credentials." "I understand," Victoria nodded earnestly. "I want to earn my place there, not expect it because we're family." As they walked back toward the parking lot together, Marcus felt a sense of completion he hadn't expected. Eleanor's final lesson hadn't just been about justice, it had been about redemption. She'd known that some people might eventually learn from their mistakes, but only after facing real consequences. "Marcus," Victoria said, as they reached their cars, "do you think she would forgive us for how we treated her?" Marcus thought about Eleanor's letter, about her hope that he would help people who deserved it. "I think she already has. The question is whether you can forgive yourselves and do better going forward." That evening, Marcus sat in his study working on the foundation's annual report. The numbers told an incredible story. Dozens of lives changed, hundreds more touched through the ripple effects of education and mentorship, and a growing movement of people committed to Eleanor's belief that character mattered more than credentials. His laptop chimed with an email from Margaret Chen, Eleanor's former financial advisor. The subject line read, "Your grandmother's final surprise." Marcus opened the email with curiosity and found a scanned document, another letter in Eleanor's handwriting, with instructions that it should be delivered exactly 1 year after the will reading. "My dearest Marcus, if you're reading this, then you've had a full year to grow into the responsibility I gave you. By now I hope you've discovered that the money was never the real inheritance. It was the opportunity to become the person I always knew you could be. I suspect you've also learned that even the people who disappointed me most deeply aren't beyond redemption. Some of them may surprise you by choosing to change. When they do, remember that second chances are also part of wealth, perhaps the most valuable kind. Keep being who you are, my dear boy. The world needs more people like you. All my love, always. Grandma Eleanor. P.S. Check your trust account tomorrow. I arranged for one final surprise to be released on this anniversary. Use it wisely." Marcus smiled, shaking his head in amazement. Even a year later, Eleanor was still teaching him lessons about grace, forgiveness, and the power of believing in people's capacity to grow. Outside his window, the city lights twinkled like stars, each one representing someone who might benefit from the foundation's work. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities to carry forward Eleanor's legacy of lifting others up through education, mentorship, and most importantly, love. The quiet woman, who'd been dismissed as irrelevant, had created a legacy that would outlast them all. The next morning, Marcus sat in Margaret Chen's office with trembling hands as she pulled up his trust account on her computer screen. Eleanor's final surprise had been delivered exactly as promised, and the number on the screen made his breath catch in his throat. $500,000, Margaret said softly. Released from a separate investment account your grandmother maintained independently. She left specific instructions about its purpose. She handed Marcus another sealed envelope, this one marked for the Eleanor Thompson Foundation Phase 2. Inside, Eleanor's careful handwriting outlined a vision that took Marcus's breath away. "Marcus, this additional fund is for expanding the foundation beyond scholarships and mentorship. I want you to purchase the old Riverside Community Center downtown. It's been for sale for 2 years, and the asking price is $300,000. Convert it into a permanent headquarters for the foundation, with space for classes, workshops, and community programs. Use the remaining $200,000 to establish satellite programs in other cities. Find local partners who share our values. Don't try to control everything from the top. Trust others to carry the mission forward in their own communities. Remember, real change happens at the grassroots level, one person at a time." Marcus looked up at Margaret in amazement. "She planned all of this, even the community center. Your grandmother contacted me about that property 6 months before she died." Margaret confirmed. She'd been watching the city council meetings where they discussed what to do with it. She said it was perfect, centrally located, accessible by public transportation, and large enough to serve the whole community. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the main hall of the newly acquired Riverside Community Center, watching volunteers paint walls and set up furniture. The transformation was remarkable. What had been a neglected, empty building was becoming a vibrant hub of activity. Victoria was there too, her sleeves rolled up as she helped organize donated books for the literacy program library. True to her word, she'd thrown herself into foundation work with genuine dedication. Her business skills had proven invaluable in streamlining operations and developing partnerships with local organizations. Marcus, called Diego Rodriguez, the former EMT student who now worked as the foundation's community outreach coordinator. "The mayor's here for the Mayor Patricia Williams, a third-generation public servant with graying hair and kind eyes, walked through the center with obvious appreciation. "This is extraordinary," she said, observing the computer lab where adults were learning digital literacy skill. "How did you accomplish so much so quickly?" "We had help," Marcus replied, thinking of the dozens of volunteers who donated time, materials, and expertise. When you give people a chance to be part of something meaningful, they step up. In the main conference room, they'd hung a large portrait of Eleanor Thompson, not a formal photograph, but the candid shot of her laughing during one of their Sunday visits. Beneath it, her words were painted in elegant script. "Real wealth isn't about what you accumulate, it's about what you contribute." The mayor paused before the portrait. "I wish I could have met her. This is exactly the kind of community investment we need." "She would have liked you," Marcus said. "She always believed in public service and people who work to make their communities better." As the tour concluded, Marcus received a text message that made him smile. It was from Bradley, of all people. After a year of unemployment and soul-searching, he'd apparently found work at a nonprofit financial counseling service. The message was brief but genuine. "Saw the news story about the community center. Grandma would be proud. Maybe I could volunteer sometime." Marcus showed the message to Victoria, who nodded thoughtfully. "People really can change. I never would have believed it a year ago, but losing everything forced me to confront who I really was underneath all the entitlement." That evening, the community center hosted its grand opening celebration. The main hall filled with scholarship recipients, mentorship program participants, volunteers and community members who'd heard about the foundation's work. Local news stations covered the event, but Marcus insisted the focus remain on the participants and their achievements rather than the dramatic story of the inherit. Maria Santos, now in her second year of pre-med studies, spoke about how the mentorship program had helped her navigate not just academics, but the cultural challenges of being first-generation college student. James Walker described how the foundation's support had given him not just educational opportunities, but a sense of family he'd never experienced in foster care. As Marcus listened to their stories, he felt Eleanor's presence in the room as strongly as if she were sitting in the front row, beaming with pride at what her careful planning had accomplished. Miss Pemberton, who'd become an informal advisor to the foundation, approached Marcus during the reception. "Your grandmother left one more item in her safety deposit box," he said quietly, handing Marcus a small wrapped package, with instructions to give it to you when the community center opened. Inside the package was Eleanor's old chemistry teacher pin, a small golden atom that she'd worn to school every day for 30 years. Attached was a note, "For my favorite student, who learned the most important lesson of all, that the best reactions happen when you combine elements that care about each other." Marcus pinned the small symbol to his jacket lapel, feeling the weight of everything Eleanor had taught him about transformation, patience, and the power of believing in people's potential. As the celebration continued around him, Marcus stepped outside onto the center's front step. The evening air was crisp with the promise of autumn, and the streetlights illuminated people walking home from the event, many of them still talking excitedly about the programs they'd learned about. A year and a half ago, he'd been a struggling college student working multiple jobs, dismissed by his family as unworthy of consideration. Tonight, he stood at the heart of a thriving community initiative that was changing lives across the city and inspiring similar programs in other states. Eleanor's final masterpiece wasn't just the financial inheritance or even the foundation itself. It was the lesson that true wealth lay in the connections between people, the opportunities created for others, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing you'd made the world a little better than you found it. As Marcus walked back inside to rejoin the celebration, he could almost hear Eleanor's voice in the laughter and conversation, filling the community center. "Well done, my dear boy. Well done." The quiet grandmother, who'd been underestimated by everyone except the person who mattered most, had created a legacy that would echo through generations. One life changed, one opportunity created, one act of kindness at a time. Part 8, 5 years later. The ripple effect continues. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Eleanor Thompson Foundation's new headquarters. As Marcus reviewed the annual impact report, 5 years had transformed not just his life, but an entire network of communities across 12 states. What had begun as one grandmother's posthumous lesson in justice had become a movement that touched thousands of lives. Marcus, now 29 and holding a master's degree in nonprofit administration, barely resembled the uncertain young man who'd sat in Mr. Pemberton's office that fateful day. His confidence came not from wealth, but from the deep satisfaction of work that mattered. The foundation now employed 43 full-time staff members and coordinated with over 200 volunteers across its various programs. "Marcus, your 10 o'clock is here," announced Sarah Kim, the foundation's program director. She'd been one of their earliest scholarship recipients, and had returned after graduating with her education degree to help other first-generation college students navigate the challenges she'd once faced. Walking into the conference room, Marcus was surprised to find Uncle Richard waiting for him. 5 years had aged his uncle considerably. His hair was now completely gray, and his expensive suits had been replaced with more modest attire. The arrogance that had once defined him seemed to have evaporated entirely. "Hello, Marcus," Richard said, standing respectfully. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." "Of course, Uncle Richard. Please, sit down." Richard took a deep breath before speaking. "I want to start by saying something I should have said years ago. Your grandmother was right about everything. About me, about our family, about you, and I owe you an apology that's long overdue." Marcus studied his uncle's face, seeing genuine remorse there. "What changed, Uncle Rich?" "Losing everything," Richard replied honestly. "The business, the house, most of our so-called friends. When the money was gone, I had to face who I really was underneath all the bluster. I didn't like what I found." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I've been working at a Veterans Assistance Center for the past 2 years, helping guys who came back from Iraq and Afghanistan get back on their feet. It's humbling work." Marcus felt a familiar stirring of the compassion Eleanor had always shown. "That's meaningful work." "It is, and it's taught me something your grandmother tried to show me years ago, that a person's worth isn't measured by their bank account." Richard leaned forward. "I've been following what you've done with the foundation, the lives you've changed, the communities you've helped. It's extraordinary, Marcus. She would be so proud. She'd be proud of all of us who've learned to do better." Marcus replied gently. Richard nodded, then reached into a worn briefcase and pulled out a folder. "That's actually why I'm here. I want to make a proposal." He opened the folder to reveal detailed plans and photographs. "The Veterans Center where I work is struggling financially. We're about to lose our lease, and there are 60 guys who depend on our services for housing assistance, job training, and counseling support." Marcus examined the documents, seeing the clear need and Richard's careful research into solutions. "I know I have no right to ask this," Richard continued, "but I was hoping the foundation might consider partnering with us. Not a handout, a true partnership. I can bring administrative experience, connections in the veteran community, and 20 years of business skills that I'd like to use for something worthwhile for one." Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Victoria, now the Foundation's Director of Community Partnerships, heading to Seattle next week to launch Program Gen 150. The domino effect continued. The Foundation had indeed become a catalyst for change far beyond what Eleanor could have imagined. Their model had been replicated in cities across the country, each adaptation reflecting local needs, while maintaining Eleanor's core principles of character-based support and community empowerment. "Uncle Richard," Marcus said finally, "Grandma Eleanor believed in second chances, but she also believed they had to be earned through action, not words. I understand. The Foundation has been looking for ways to expand our support for veterans. If you're serious about this partnership, you'll need to submit a formal proposal, go through our standard evaluation process, and prove that this isn't about guilt or family obligation, but about genuine commitment to serving others." Richard nodded eagerly. "I want to earn this, Mark. I want to prove that people can change, even stubborn old fools like me." As his uncle left, Marcus walked to Eleanor's portrait, now accompanied by dozens of photos showing Foundation program graduates at their college graduations, in their new jobs, starting their own families, and launching their own community initiative. Margaret Chen, now in her 70s but still sharp as ever, appeared beside him. "Your grandmother always said the most beautiful thing about planting seeds was that you never knew how big the tree would grow. Did she really plan all of this?" Marcus asked, gesturing to the bustling headquarters around them. Margaret smiled mysteriously. "Eleanor was a chemistry teacher, Marcus. She understood chain reactions better than anyone. She knew that if she could just create the right initial conditions, the right amount of pressure, the right catalyst, the reaction would continue long after she was gone." That evening, Marcus stood on his apartment balcony overlooking the city, holding the latest letters from Foundation alumni. Dr. Maria Santos had just opened her own medical practice in an underserved community. James Walker was running for city council on a platform of foster care reform. Rachel Kim had started a nonprofit, helping immigrant families navigate the education system. Each success story represented not just an individual transformation, but a multiplier effect. Maria would inspire other young women from her neighborhood to pursue medicine. James would advocate for policies that helped thousands of children. Rachel would create opportunities for entire families to build better futures. Marcus's phone rang, displaying a number he didn't recognize. "Hello? Is this Marcus Thompson from the Eleanor Thompson Foundation?" The voice belonged to a young woman, nervous but determined. "Yes, this is Marcus. My name is Ashley Chen, no relation to Margaret Chen," she said with a small laugh. "I'm a senior in high school in Portland, Oregon. My guidance counselor told me about your foundation's scholarship program, and I was hoping you might have time to hear my story." Marcus smiled, settling into his chair. "I have all the time in the world, Ashley. Tell me about yourself." As he listened to another young person's dreams and struggles, Marcus felt Eleanor's presence as strongly as ever. Her final lesson hadn't been about money or family drama. It had been about the infinite capacity of human potential when nurtured with wisdom, compassion, and strategic thinking. The quiet grandmother who'd been dismissed as irrelevant had created a legacy that would outlast them all, one changed life at a time. Somewhere in the evening breeze, Marcus could almost hear Eleanor's voice. "Well done, my dear boy. Now keep going." Part 9. The Next Generation, and Eleanor's Enduring Wisdom. 10 years after that life-changing day in Mr. Pemberton's office, Marcus stood before a packed auditorium at Harvard University, delivering the keynote address for their annual philanthropy symposium. At 34, he'd become a nationally recognized expert on character-based community development. But today's speech wasn't about his achievements. It was about Eleanor's enduring wisdom. "My grandmother understood something that most people miss," Marcus told the audience of graduate students, nonprofit leaders, and social entrepreneurs. "True wealth isn't created by accumulating resources. It's created by releasing human potential." In the front row sat Maria Santos, now running a network of community health clinics across 3 states. Beside her, Councilman James Walker, who'd just announced his candidacy for state legislature on a platform of comprehensive foster care reform. The foundation's first graduates had become leaders themselves, carrying Eleanor's principles into new arenas of influence. After his speech, Marcus was approached by a young woman with familiar eyes and determined posture. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Emma Rodriguez, Diego's daughter. I just wanted to thank you for what your foundation did for my family." Marcus remembered Diego well, Mrs. Rodriguez's grandson who'd become an EMT, then a paramedic supervisor, and now trained emergency responders across the region. "How is your father doing?" "He's wonderful, and because of the opportunities he had, he was able to support me through medical school. I'm starting my residency in pediatric emergency medicine next month." Emma's eyes sparkled with the same determination Marcus remembered seeing in Eleanor's face. "I want to work in underserved communities, places where kids don't always get the medical care they need." As Emma walked away to pursue her own mission of service, Marcus felt the familiar sense of awe at Eleanor's continuing influence. Her investment in one person had rippled out to touch an entire family across generations. The foundation's latest annual report told an extraordinary story. The Eleanor Thompson Foundation now operated in 18 states, had awarded over 2,000 scholarships, and had spawned 47 independent sister organizations using their model. The total economic impact measured in increased lifetime earnings of participants, businesses started, jobs created, and taxes paid exceeded $50 million, but the numbers, impressive as they were, didn't capture the real magic of what Eleanor had set in motion. That evening, Marcus attended a reunion dinner for the foundation's 10th anniversary. The hotel ballroom buzzed with conversations between scholarship recipients who'd become doctors, teachers, social workers, entrepreneurs, and public servants. Their children played in a corner of the room, representing the next generation that would benefit from their parents' opportunities. Victoria, now the foundation's executive director, approached Marcus with a tablet showing social media posts from the event. "Look at this," she said, scrolling through dozens of photos and testimonials. "Ashley Chen just posted about starting her own nonprofit in Portland. Remember her? She was that nervous high school senior who called you 5 years ago." Marcus smiled, remembering that phone call and many others like it. Ashley's organization now helped immigrant students navigate the college application process, creating yet another branch in Eleanor's ever-expanding tree of influence. The evening's most moving moment came when Uncle Richard took the microphone, now 72 and serving as the Foundation's Director of Veteran Services. He'd transformed completely from the bitter, entitled man who'd once dismissed Marcus as nobody. 10 years ago, Richard said, his voice carrying clearly through the room, I thought wealth was about what you owned. My mother, Eleanor Thompson, taught me that wealth is about what you give away and who you lift up. Every veteran I've helped find housing, every young person who's found their path through this foundation, every family that's been strengthened, that's the real measure of what Eleanor accomplished. He paused, looking directly at Marcus, and she did it by seeing potential in a young man that the rest of us were too blind and selfish to recognize. The greatest gift she gave this family wasn't money, it was the example of what one person can do when they understand that everyone deserves a chance to become their best self. Later that night, Marcus returned to his apartment and opened Eleanor's final letter, the one she'd written to be delivered on the Foundation's 10th anniversary. Mr. Pemberton, now retired but still handling Eleanor's final surprises, had delivered it that morning with a knowing smile. My dearest Marcus, if you're reading this, then my little experiment in human potential has succeeded beyond even my wildest dream. I knew you had the character to use money wisely, but I wondered if you'd have the vision to understand that the real inheritance wasn't financial, it was the opportunity to prove that one person's belief in others can change the world. By now you've probably discovered that I've been quietly funding similar foundations in other countries. There's one in Ghana helping young women pursue STEM education, another in Bangladesh supporting micro-enterprise development, and a third in Romania, assisting children aging out of orphanage. Each one follows the same principle: invest in character and everything else follows. You see, Marcus, I learned something during my years as a chemistry teacher that I never told you. The most beautiful reactions aren't the ones that happen quickly and burn out. They're the ones that create stable compounds that go on to catalyze other reactions. You and the Foundation have become my most successful experiment in human chemistry. Keep going, my dear boy. The world needs more people who understand that true power lies not in what you can take, but in what you can give. All my love, across time and space, Grandma Eleanor. P.S. Check with Margaret Chen tomorrow. There's one more small surprise waiting for you. Marcus set the letter down and walked to his window, looking out over a city that had been transformed in countless small ways by Eleanor's vision. Somewhere out there, a young person was studying late into the night with the help of a Foundation scholarship. A veteran was starting a new job thanks to the placement program Richard now ran. A family was building a better future because someone had believed in their potential. Eleanor Thompson had understood the most profound truth about wealth. It wasn't about having enough for yourself, it was about creating enough opportunities for others that the abundance would multiply forever. The quiet grandmother who'd been dismissed as irrelevant had become immortal through the lives she'd touched and the potential she'd unleashed. Her legacy would continue growing, one changed life at a time, long after everyone who'd known her personally was gone. In the morning, Marcus would discover Eleanor's final surprise and continue building on the foundation she'd laid, but tonight, he simply felt grateful to have been chosen as the guardian of a vision that had proven larger and more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. The ripple effect would never end. The next morning, Marcus sat in Margaret Chen's office for what she'd promised would be their final meeting, regarding Eleanor's posthumous surprises. At 82, Margaret moved more slowly than she once had, but her eyes still sparkled with the same sharp intelligence that had made her Eleanor's trusted confidant for over 3 decades. Your grandmother was quite the strategist, Margaret said, pulling out a thick manila envelope sealed with wax. Eleanor's personal seal from her chemistry teaching days. This final surprise has been waiting in my vault for exactly 10 years, and one day, Marcus broke the seal with trembling fingers, revealing documents that would once again reshape his understanding of Eleanor's incredible foresight. Inside was a deed to a 500-acre property in the mountains of North Carolina, along with architectural plans for what Eleanor had envisioned as the Institute for Character-Based Leadership. She bought this land 15 years ago, Margaret explained, right after your mother died, and she saw how you stepped up to take care of everything. She told me then that she was watching you become the kind of person the world needed more of. The architectural plans were breathtaking, a residential campus designed to host leadership retreats, educational conferences, and immersive programs for young people from around the world. The main building was designed to accommodate 200 residents, with smaller facilities for workshops, outdoor education, and what Eleanor had labeled real-world problem-solving laboratory. But it was Eleanor's accompanying letter that took Marcus's breath away. "My dearest Marcus, if you're reading this, then you've successfully stewarded my small inheritance into something far greater than I ever dared hope. The foundation has become exactly what I envisioned, a catalyst for unleashing human potential on a scale that ripples across generations. This final gift represents my ultimate faith in what you've become. The Institute for Character-Based Leadership is designed to be the next evolution of our work. Instead of just helping individuals succeed within existing systems, I want you to train the leaders who will transform those systems themselves. I envision young people from every continent coming together on this mountain to learn not just skills, but wisdom. To understand that true leadership isn't about commanding others, but about seeing potential where others see problems. To discover that the greatest innovations come not from technology alone, but from combining technical knowledge with deep human understanding. I've left detailed endowments to fund this institute for the next century. The money is already invested and growing. By the time you read this, there should be sufficient funds to build, staff, and operate the institute while maintaining all of the foundation's existing programs. This is my final surprise, Marcus, but not my final hope. My final hope is that someday, decades from now, world leaders will trace their inspiration back to something they learned on this mountain. That scientists will credit their breakthrough discoveries to understanding they gained about human collaboration here. That teachers will transform education because of insights they developed about character and potential during their time at the Institute. You have become everything I hoped you might be, and so much more than I dared dream. Now I'm asking you to dream even bigger than I did. Use this place to change the world, one leader at a time. All my love, always and forever. Grandma Eleanor." Margaret handed Marcus another document, the financial statements for Eleanor's secret endowment. The numbers were staggering, over $15 million carefully invested and managed, generating enough annual income to fund the Institute's operations in perpetuity while continuing to grow the principal. "She thought of everything," Marcus whispered, studying the plans that showed Eleanor had even considered renewable energy systems, sustainable agriculture programs, and partnerships with universities worldwide. "Not quite everything," Margaret said with a mysterious smile. "There's one more thing." She reached into her desk and pulled out a small wooden box carved with chemical symbol. Inside, nestled in velvet, was Eleanor's original periodic table pin from her first day of teaching, along with a note. "For the director of the Eleanor Thompson Institute for Character-Based Leadership, may you continue to understand that the most powerful reactions happen when diverse elements combine in the presence of the right catalyst." 3 months later, Marcus stood on the construction site of the Institute, watching bulldozers begin preparing the foundation. The view from the mountain was spectacular, rolling hills stretching to the horizon, a perfect metaphor for the unlimited potential Eleanor had always seen in people. Victoria approached, wearing a hard hat and carrying blueprint. As the project manager for the Institute's construction, she'd thrown herself into realizing Eleanor's vision with the same dedication she'd once applied to her MBA coursework. "The first dormitory will be ready in 18 months, she reported. "We've already received applications from potential students in 43 countries. The demand is incredible." Diego Rodriguez, now in his 50s and serving as the Foundation's Director of International Programs, joined them. "I just got off a call with our partners in Bangladesh. They want to send their top 3 scholarship recipients to the Institute's inaugural leadership program." As the sun set over the mountains, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. 15 years ago, he'd been a struggling college student dismissed by his family as unworthy of consideration. Today, he was overseeing the creation of an institution designed to identify and develop the next generation of global leaders. But the most remarkable part wasn't his personal transformation. It was the realization that Eleanor had set all of this in motion, not through detailed planning alone, but through profound faith in human potential. She'd believed that given the right opportunities and support, Ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things. The Institute would be her ultimate experiment in that belief. Young people from every background and continent would come together to learn not just leadership skills, but the deeper wisdom about character, service, and the power of believing in others that Eleanor had spent her lifetime perfecting. As Marcus walked back toward his car, he passed the monument that would stand at the Institute's entrance, a simple granite stone with Eleanor's words carved deep. The greatest leaders are those who help others discover the greatness within themselves. Somewhere in the evening breeze that rustled through the pine trees, Marcus could almost hear Eleanor's voice carried on the wind. "Now this is just the beginning, my dear boy. The best is yet to come." The quiet grandmother who'd been underestimated by everyone except the person who mattered most, had created a legacy that would shape leaders and change the world for generations to come. Her final surprise had revealed the ultimate truth about wealth. It wasn't about having enough for yourself, but about creating enough opportunities for others that the abundance would multiply forever, reaching every corner of the globe and every future generation. Eleanor Thompson's revolution in human potential was just getting started. Part 11. The Institute opens and global impact begins. 2 years after breaking ground, the Eleanor Thompson Institute for Character-Based Leadership welcomed its first cohort of students on a crisp September morning. Marcus stood at the entrance, watching young people from 6 continents stream through the gates, their faces bright with anticipation and purpose. At 36, he'd grown into the role Eleanor had envisioned for him, not just as a foundation director, but as a shepherd of global change. The Institute's opening ceremony drew attention from around the world. Nobel Peace Prize laureate Dr. Amara Okafor delivered the keynote address, speaking about how character-based leadership had transformed her approach to conflict resolution in West Africa. Former President Michel Santos of Brazil participated via video link, crediting her own leadership philosophy to principles that aligned perfectly with Eleanor's vision. "Today, we plant seeds that will grow into forests of change," Dr. Okafor told the assembled crowd of 150 inaugural students. "This mountain will send forth leaders who understand that true power lies not in commanding others, but in helping them discover their own greatness." Among the first cohort was Priya Sharma, a 22-year-old engineer from Mumbai who'd grown up in poverty but earned her degree through sheer determination and a scholarship from the Foundation's India Partner Organization. Sitting beside her was João Santos, a former street child from São Paulo who'd become a youth advocate after being helped by the Foundation's Brazilian affiliate. The diversity was breathtaking. Former refugees sat next to tech entrepreneurs, rural teachers learned alongside urban activists, and young people who'd never left their home villages shared ideas with others who'd already traveled the world. What united them all was the quality Eleanor had recognized in Marcus years ago, the combination of personal character and commitment to serving others. Victoria, now serving as the Institute's Dean of Students, had worked tirelessly to create a program that would challenge participants intellectually while developing their emotional intelligence and ethical reasoning. The curriculum combined traditional leadership training with hands-on problem-solving, immersive cultural exchange, and what Eleanor had called wisdom workshop sessions focused on understanding human nature, building trust, and seeing potential where others saw only problems. "It's not enough to teach people how to lead," Victoria explained to a visiting documentary crew. "We need to help them understand why they should lead and what they're leading toward." That's what Eleanor understood, that leadership without character is just manipulation, but character without leadership skills can't create the change the world needs. The Institute's first major project exemplified this philosophy. Students were divided into international teams and challenged to address real-world problems in partnership with local communities. One team worked with farmers in Kenya to develop drought-resistant agricultural techniques. Another partnered with educators in rural Bangladesh to create literacy programs that honored local cultures while building essential skills. Marcus watched these collaborations with growing amazement. Eleanor's vision was proving even more powerful than he'd imagined. The young leaders weren't just learning theories, they were creating actual change, while developing the skills and perspectives they'd need to tackle even bigger challenges throughout their career. 3 months into the program, Marcus received a call that demonstrated the institute's ripple effect was already beginning. Dr. Maria Santos, now running her network of community health clinics, was on the line with exciting news. "Marcus, you won't believe this. I just hired 2 recent medical school graduates who specifically chose their specialty because they were inspired by stories about the foundation. They want to work in underserved communities because they said they learned about the Eleanor Thompson approach to seeing potential in every patient." Similar reports began arriving from around the world. James Walker, now serving his 2nd term in the state legislature, was mentoring young politicians in other states who wanted to apply character-based leadership principles to policymaking. Ashley Chen's immigrant education nonprofit in Portland had inspired similar organizations in 15 other cities. The institute's influence was multiplying faster than anyone had anticipated. Students would spend 6 months on the mountain, then return to their home countries as Eleanor ambassadors, carrying not just new skills, but a fundamentally different understanding of what leadership could accomplish. One evening, as Marcus walked through the institute's gardens, he encountered Kwame Asante, a 24-year-old from Ghana who'd been selected for the program after creating a microfinance cooperative that had helped over 200 families start small business. Kwame was sitting on a bench, video chatting with his younger sister back home. "Tell her about the leadership garden," Marcus suggested, knowing how the institute's hands-on learning projects resonated with students. Kwame's face lit up. "Abba, you should see this place. We're not just studying leadership, we're practicing it every day. Yesterday, I helped design a water filtration system with students from Brazil and Bangladesh. Tomorrow, we're presenting our solution to the UN Development Program." After the call ended, Kwame turned to Mark. "Sir, I need to ask you something. How did your grandmother know? How did she understand that bringing people together like this would create something so powerful?" Marcus sat down beside him, looking up at the stars beginning to appear in the mountain sky. "She was a chemistry teacher, Kwame. She understood that the most amazing reactions happen when you combine different elements under the right conditions. This institute, all of us, were her greatest experiment in human chemistry. And we're the proof that it works," Kwame said thoughtfully. "No," Marcus replied, thinking of Eleanor's letters and her faith in human potential. "We're just the beginning. The real proof will be what you and your classmates accomplish over the next 50 years. As they sat in comfortable silence, Marcus reflected on how far they'd all come. Eleanor's simple act of leaving money to the grandson who'd shown her love and respect had now evolved into a global network that was literally training the next generation of world leaders. But Marcus knew Eleanor wouldn't be surprised by any of this. She'd always understood that small acts of faith in human potential, consistently applied with wisdom and strategy, could change everything. The quiet grandmother who'd been dismissed as irrelevant was now shaping the minds that would solve the 21st century's greatest challenge. Her revolution in human potential was gaining momentum every day, one leader at a time. Part 12, A Crisis Tests Eleanor's Vision. 5 years after the Institute's opening, Marcus faced the greatest challenge to Eleanor's legacy. A global economic crisis had struck, triggering widespread unemployment, social unrest, and a growing skepticism about institutions that promised to help people. Critics began questioning whether character-based leadership was just idealistic nonsense when faced with real-world hardship. The attacks came from multiple directions. A prominent business magazine published an article titled, "The Eleanor Delusion: Why Feel-Good Leadership Can't Fix Real Problems." Social media buzzed with skeptics claiming that the institute was just an expensive playground for privileged young people who'd never faced genuine adversity. Most painfully, several major donors to similar organizations pulled their funding, declaring that soft skills programs were luxuries the world couldn't afford during a crisis. Marcus sat in his office at 2 a.m., reading hostile comments on the institute's social media pages. "These kids are living in a fantasy," one critic had written. "When people are losing their homes and can't feed their families, they need jobs and money, not lectures about character and potential." The pressure was enormous. Board members were questioning whether they should scale back the program. Even some staff members wondered if they should pivot toward more traditional job training and economic development programs. The Institute's application numbers had dropped by 40%, as young people increasingly chose programs that promised immediate employment over long-term leadership development. But then the Eleanor ambassadors began to Priya Sharma, the engineer from Mumbai who'd been in the institute's first cohort, was now running a technology company that had refused to lay off workers during the crisis. Instead, she'd redesigned her business model to create more jobs while developing affordable housing solutions for displaced families. Her company's innovations were being adopted across South Asia. "The institute didn't teach me to avoid problems," Priya posted in a viral video response to critics. "It taught me to see opportunities where others see only obstacles. Every crisis reveals who people really are." Eleanor Thompson believed that character shows up most clearly when things get difficult. João Santos, the former street child from São Paulo, had become a city councilman who was implementing innovative programs to help unemployed workers transition into emerging green energy industry. His approach combined job training with community building and mental health support, exactly the kind of holistic thinking the institute had fostered. "People don't just need jobs," João explained to international media covering his programs. "They need dignity, purpose, and hope." That's what character-based leadership understands that purely economic approaches miss. Kwame Asante had returned to Ghana and was now coordinating a network of agricultural cooperatives that were not only weathering the economic storm, but actually expanding their operation. His approach combined traditional farming wisdom with modern sustainability techniques, creating food security while providing stable employment for thousands of families. The most powerful response came from an unexpected source. Elena Vasquez, a former institute student who'd become an epidemiologist, published a research paper showing that communities led by Eleanor ambassadors were demonstrating measurably better outcomes during the crisis: lower unemployment rates, reduced crime, better mental health indicators, and stronger social cohesion. The data was undeniable. "Character-based leadership isn't separate from practical problem-solving," Dr. Vasquez wrote. "It's a more effective approach to practical problem-solving because it addresses root causes instead of just symptoms." Marcus realized that the crisis was actually validating Eleanor's vision rather than undermining it. The Institute's graduates weren't retreating from real-world problems. They were creating innovative solutions that others couldn't see because they'd learned to think differently about human potential. The breakthrough moment came during an emergency conference call with Eleanor ambassadors from around the world. Student after student shared stories of how they were applying Institute principles to crisis response. A young woman from Bangladesh had created a microfinance program specifically for women whose husbands had lost jobs. A man from Kenya was coordinating with regional leaders to develop drought-resistant farming techniques that were actually creating new employment opportunities. "We're not in the inspiration business," said Apanat al-Rashid, a graduate who was now coordinating refugee services across the Middle East. "We're in the transformation business." Eleanor Thompson understood that the biggest problems require the kind of thinking that can only come from people who've learned to see potential where others see limitation. Marcus found himself thinking about Eleanor's approach to his own family crisis all those years ago. She hadn't just punished bad behavior, she'd created conditions for growth and change. She'd seen potential for transformation even in people like Uncle Richard and Victoria, and she'd been right. The Institute doubled down on its mission. Instead of scaling back, they launched an emergency fellowship program for young leaders specifically working on crisis response. They partnered with universities to offer free online courses in character-based problem solving. Most importantly, they documented and shared the innovative solutions Eleanor ambassadors were creating around the world. 6 months later, the tide had turned completely. The same business magazine that had criticized the Institute published a follow-up article titled, "The Eleanor Effect: How Character-Based Leaders Are Solving the Unsolvable." International development organizations began incorporating Institute principles into their program. The United Nations invited Marcus to address the General Assembly about sustainable leadership development. But the moment that would have made Eleanor proudest came in a letter from a young person in Detroit who'd never heard of the Institute before the crisis. "Dear Mr. Thompson," it read, I saw a video about one of your graduates who started a program helping unemployed auto workers become urban farmers. I've been out of work for 2 years and felt hopeless, but watching how she talked about seeing opportunities instead of just problems made me think, maybe I could start something too. I'm writing to ask if there might be a place for someone like me at your institute. I don't have much education, but I care about my community and I want to learn how to help. Marcus smiled, hearing Eleanor's voice in his memory. The greatest leaders are those who help others discover the greatness within themselves. The crisis had tested Eleanor's vision and proven it stronger than ever. Character-based leadership wasn't a luxury for good times, it was exactly what the world needed when times were hardest. 20 years after that life-changing day in Mr. Pemberton's office, Marcus stood before the United Nations General Assembly in New York, delivering a keynote address on character-based solutions to global challenges. At 44, he'd become one of the world's most recognized voices on transformational leadership. But his opening words were vintage Eleanor Thompson, simple, direct, and focused on others rather than himself. 20 years ago, Marcus began, "My grandmother left me an inheritance that I thought was about money. Today, I understand it was about something far more valuable, the knowledge that every human being contains unlimited potential waiting to be unlocked by the right combination of opportunity, support, and belief." The audience included heads of state, Nobel laureates, and leaders from every sector of society. In the front row sat 3 people who embodied Eleanor's legacy in different ways. Dr. Sharma, now serving as India's Minister of Innovation and Technology, Kwame Asante, who'd just been elected to Ghana's parliament on a platform of sustainable development, and João Santos, whose model for urban renewal in São Paulo was being replicated in cities across Latin America. But perhaps the most remarkable attendee was Victoria, now 66 and serving as the Institute's chancellor. Her complete transformation from entitled heiress to dedicated servant leader had become a case study in human potential that was taught at leadership programs worldwide. She sat with quiet dignity, taking notes as her nephew addressed the world's most powerful leaders. Marcus's speech outlined the Eleanor Thompson Global Initiative, a new phase in the Institute's evolution. After 15 years of training individual leaders, they were ready to tackle systemic change on a global scale. The initiative would focus on 3 interconnected challenges: climate change, economic inequality, and social fragmentation problems that required exactly the kind of holistic, character-based thinking Eleanor had pioneered. These challenges can't be solved by technology alone, or economics alone, or politics alone, Marcus explained. They require leaders who understand that sustainable solutions must address human nature, not just human needs. The initiative's first major project was already underway. Eleanor ambassadors from 12 countries were collaborating on a comprehensive approach to climate resilience that combined environmental science with community development, economic opportunity creation, and cultural preservation. Instead of imposing solutions from the outside, they were working with local communities to develop strategies that honored existing wisdom while incorporating new technology. In Bangladesh, this meant working with traditional fishing communities to develop aquaculture systems that could adapt to rising sea levels while preserving cultural practices and creating new economic opportunities. In Kenya, it involved partnering with Maasai communities to develop sustainable tourism models that protected both the environment and indigenous ways of life. The economic component was equally innovative. Rather than treating poverty as a problem to be managed, Eleanor ambassadors were creating systems that recognized poverty as a waste of human potential. Microfinance programs were combined with mentorship networks. Job training was paired with leadership development. Every economic intervention was designed to not just provide immediate relief, but to develop local capacity for ongoing innovation and growth. Perhaps most importantly, the initiative was addressing what Marcus called the empathy crisis, the growing tendency for people to retreat into isolated communities of those who shared their beliefs and background. Eleanor ambassadors were creating programs that brought people together across traditional divides, helping them discover shared values and common ground. After his UN speech, Marcus was approached by Secretary General Amina Hassan, who'd been following the Institute's work for years. "Mr. Thompson, we'd like to propose something unprecedented." The United Nations has never formally partnered with a private educational institution, but we believe the Eleanor Thompson Institute has proven that character-based leadership can create the kind of systemic change the world desperately needs. The proposed partnership would establish Eleanor Thompson leadership centers in conflict zones around the world, training local leaders to apply character-based approaches to peacebuilding, reconstruction, and sustainable development. It was exactly the kind of scaling that Eleanor had envisioned in her most ambitious moments. That evening, Marcus called Uncle Richard, now 85 and still volunteering at the Veterans Center, to share the news about the UN partnership. Richard's voice was filled with wonder as he processed the magnitude of what Eleanor's initial gift had become. "Marcus, do you ever think about what would have happened if she'd just divided the money equally among all of us back then?" Marcus considered the question. "We probably would have spent it and forgotten about it within a few years. Instead, she created something that's going to outlast all of us. She saw something in you that none of us recognized," Richard said quietly. "Hell, something you didn't even recognize in yourself." The next morning, Marcus received a letter that reminded him why Eleanor's approach remained so powerful. It was from Aisha Okafor, a 16-year-old refugee from Somalia, who'd been accepted into the Institute's new youth leadership program. "Dear Thompson," she wrote, "I have lived in 3 different refugee camps and spoken 5 languages, but I have never had anyone tell me that I have leadership potential. When the Eleanor ambassador who visited our camp said that my experiences had given me unique insights that could help other displaced people, I didn't believe her. But now I'm beginning to think that maybe the hardest parts of my life weren't just things that happened to me. Maybe they were preparation for something bigger." Marcus smiled, recognizing the same awakening to possibility that Eleanor had sparked in him decades ago. The Institute now had a waiting list of over 10,000 applicants from every country in the world. More importantly, it had created a global network of leaders who understood that their greatest responsibility wasn't to accumulate power for themselves, but to recognize and develop potential in others. Eleanor's quiet revolution in human potential had become a global movement that was literally reshaping how the world approached its most complex challenges, and this was still just the beginning. The grandmother who'd been dismissed as irrelevant had become the intellectual architect of a new approach to global leadership that prioritized character over credentials, potential over pedigree, and service over stat. Her final surprise was that there would be no final surprise, just an endless unfolding of human potential that would continue long after everyone who'd known her personally was gone. Part 14, The Full Circle Moment and Marcus's Greatest Test. 25 years after Eleanor's will reading, Marcus faced a moment that would have made his grandmother smile with perfect satisfaction. At 49, he stood in the same law office where his life had changed forever, but this time he was the one planning a legacy that would outlast his own lifetime. Mr. Pemberton's son, David, now ran the firm and had called Marcus in to discuss something unprecedented. "Marcus, we've been managing Eleanor Thompson's affairs for over 6 decades, spanning 2 generations of our family. What your grandmother set in motion has become the most successful example of strategic philanthropy in recorded history, but now we need to talk about what happens next." Marcus had been thinking about this conversation for months. At 49, he was still young and healthy, but Eleanor's example had taught him the importance of planning decades ahead. The Eleanor Thompson Global Initiative now operated in 67 countries, had trained over 15,000 leaders, and had created measurable positive change in the lives of millions of people. The question was, how to ensure it would continue growing long after he was gone. "I've been studying your grandmother's approach," David continued, "and I think I understand her genius. She didn't just leave you money, she left you a series of tests designed to develop your character and judgment. Each surprise, each revelation was carefully calibrated to help you grow into the person who could handle greater responsibility." Marcus nodded, remembering the gradual unfolding of Eleanor's vision over the decades. She was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. "Which brings me to why I asked you here today." David handed Marcus a thick folder. "Your grandmother left one final instruction. to be implemented exactly 25 years after the original will reading. Marcus opened the folder with trembling hands, finding a letter in Eleanor's familiar handwriting dated just weeks before her death. My dearest Marcus, if you're reading this, then you've successfully stewarded my gift for a quarter century and proven yourself worthy of the ultimate trust. You've transformed from a young man seeking approval into a leader who inspires others to find their own greatness. Now comes your most important test. I'm asking you to do what I did. Choose an unlikely success. Somewhere in the world right now is a young person who seems ordinary, unremarkable, perhaps even dismissed by others. Find them. See their potential when no one else does. Give them the same gift I gave you, the opportunity to discover they're capable of changing the world. But here's the crucial difference. They must earn it through character, not inheritance. Create a process that identifies not the most obviously talented, but the most genuinely committed to serving others. Test their judgment, their resilience, their ability to see potential in people that others overlook. This person will become your successor, but more importantly, they'll become the guardian of our approach to human potential. Through them, the work will continue for another generation, and through their successor for another, and so on forever. The true inheritance was never the money, Marcus. It was the responsibility to keep believing in people when others have given up on them. Find your success. Trust them as I trusted you. The future depends on it. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. P.S. The endowment has grown significantly. They'll have more resources than you started with, but they'll also face greater challenges. Choose wise. Marcus set down the letter, his mind reeling with the magnitude of what Eleanor was asking. Over the years he'd met thousands of remarkable young people through the Institute's programs, but Eleanor wasn't talking about choosing from among the obviously gifted. She wanted him to find someone who was being overlooked, underestimated, dismissed just as he had been. There's more, David said, handing him another document. Your grandmother established a separate fund that's been growing for 25 years. It's now worth $12 million, specifically designated for your successor's initial work. The search process, Eleanor had envisioned, was detailed and thoughtful. Instead of accepting applications, Marcus would need to actively seek out candidates in unexpected places. The criteria were clear: demonstrated character under pressure, commitment to serving others despite personal cost, and the ability to see potential where others saw only problems. Over the following months, Marcus traveled to places he'd never been before, looking for Eleanor's next chosen one. He visited homeless shelters and community centers, rural schools and urban clinics. He spoke with social workers, teachers, coaches, and volunteers who worked with young people facing difficult circumstances. In Detroit, he met Latasha Williams, a 26-year-old former foster child, who'd started a program helping other foster youth transition to independence. Despite having every reason to be bitter about her own experiences, Latasha radiated the same quiet strength Marcus remembered from Eleanor. In rural Montana, he encountered Jake Morrison, a rancher's son, who'd given up a full scholarship to agricultural college to care for his disabled father and keep the family ranch running. Jake had also started a program connecting elderly farmers with young people wanting to learn traditional agricultural skills. In Los Angeles, there was Maria Elena Gonzalez, an undocumented immigrant, who'd built an underground network, helping other immigrants access education and health care, while remaining invisible to authorities. Her courage and strategic thinking reminded Marcus of Eleanor's careful planning. Each candidate was remarkable in their own way, but Eleanor's final letter had been specific. The choice must be made not with the head, but with the heart. Marcus needed to find the person who possessed that rare combination of humility and vision that could handle the responsibility of carrying Eleanor's legacy forward. The decision would determine not just the future of the Eleanor Thompson Global Initiative, but whether her revolutionary approach to human potential would continue transforming the world for generations to come. As Marcus prepared to make the most important choice of his life, he could almost hear Eleanor's voice whispering the question that had started it all: who do you see when you look past what others expect? The answer would determine everything. Part 15. The final choice in Eleanor's eternal legacy. Marcus stood in the very spot where his life had changed forever, 25 years ago, holding 3 files that represented 3 extraordinary lives. Each candidate embodied different aspects of the character Eleanor had seen in him: resilience, sacrifice, and vision. But as he reviewed their stories one final time, Eleanor's voice echoed in his memory with crystal clarity: the greatest leaders are those who help others discover the greatness within themselves. Suddenly, Marcus understood. Eleanor's final lesson wasn't about choosing between three remarkable candidates. It was about recognizing that the choice itself revealed the deepest truth about leadership. He turned to David Pemberton with a smile that would have made Eleanor proud. "I need to make a phone call." An hour later, three confused young people sat in the same conference room where Marcus had learned about his inheritance decades ago. Latasha Williams shifted nervously in her chair, still wearing her Detroit Community Center uniform. Jake Morrison kept his calloused hands folded, clearly uncomfortable in the formal setting. Maria Elena Gonzalez watched everything with the cautious alertness of someone who'd learned that unexpected meetings could change everything. "I asked you all here," Marcus began, "because each of you has spent your life doing something extraordinary, seeing potential in people that others have written off. Latasha, you've helped over 300 foster youth find their way to independence and purpose. Jake, your program has connected 150 elderly farmers with young apprentices, preserving knowledge that would have been lost forever. Maria Elena, your network has helped thousands of families access education and opportunities they never thought possible." The three exchanged glances, still unsure why they were there. Marcus continued, "My grandmother once told me that the most powerful reactions happen when different elements combine under the right conditions. I spent months thinking I needed to choose one of you to carry on her legacy. But that's not what Eleanor would have done." He opened a folder containing Eleanor's endowment details. "Instead of choosing one successor, I'm choosing all three. The Eleanor Thompson Global Initiative is expanding into 3 specialized branches, and each of you will lead one. Latasha would head the Institute for Youth Potential, focusing on children and young adults who'd been dismissed by traditional systems. Jake would direct the Center for Intergenerational Wisdom, connecting different generations to solve problems through combined experience and innovation. Maria Elena would lead the Global Community Bridge Initiative, helping marginalized populations access opportunities while preserving their cultural identity. "But that's not the real surprise," Marcus said, his eyes twinkling with the same mischief Eleanor had once shown. "Each of you will receive not just funding and resources, but something more valuable: the responsibility to find your own successors. In 25 years, each of you will face the same choice I'm making today. You'll identify 3 more unlikely leaders and the network will expand again." Marcus pulled out a calculator and wrote numbers on the whiteboard. 3 leaders become 9, 9 become 27, 27 become 81. In just 4 generations, Eleanor's approach to human potential will be guided by nearly 250 leaders worldwide, each one chosen not for their credentials, but for their character. The mathematical beauty of Eleanor's final strategy was breathtaking. She hadn't just created a foundation or even a movement. She'd designed a self-replicating system that would grow exponentially while maintaining its core values of character-based leadership. Latasha found her voice first. "Mr. Thompson, I don't understand. Why us? We're not famous or important. We're just trying to help our communities." Marcus smiled, remembering asking Eleanor the same question years ago. "That's exactly why. You're not doing this work for recognition or personal gain. You're doing it because you believe in people that others have given up on. That's the only qualification that matters." Over the following months, the transition began. The 3 new leaders brought fresh perspectives and passionate energy to the work, while maintaining Eleanor's fundamental insight that every human being possessed untapped potential waiting to be unlocked. 5 years later, Marcus sat in Eleanor's favorite chair in the Institute's Memorial Garden, reading updates from around the world. Latasha's youth programs had spread to 15 countries. Jake's intergenerational initiatives were revolutionizing how societies addressed both aging populations and youth unemployment. Maria Elena's community bridge projects were helping preserve indigenous knowledge while creating economic opportunities in developing regions. But the reports that would have made Eleanor happiest came from the second generation of leaders. Young people who'd been transformed by the programs were now identifying and developing potential in others. The exponential growth Eleanor had envisioned was becoming reality. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his own successor, a young woman named Sarah Kim, who'd grown up in the foster care system and was now running the institute's day-to-day operations. "Marcus, you need to see this. A high school dropout in Bangladesh just started a literacy program that's already taught 200 adults to read. The local Eleanor ambassador thinks he might be successor material." As the sun set over the mountains, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him here. 25 years ago, he'd thought he was inheriting money. Instead, he'd inherited the greatest lesson ever taught, that true wealth isn't about what you accumulate for yourself, it's about what you multiply in others. Eleanor Thompson had understood the most profound truth about human potential. It was infinite, renewable, and contagious. Every person whose potential was unlocked would go on to unlock potential in others, creating an endless chain reaction of human flourishing that would continue long after everyone who'd known Eleanor personally was gone. The quiet grandmother who'd been dismissed as irrelevant by her own family had become immortal, not through monuments or fame, but through the countless lives she'd touched and the endless potential she'd set free. Her final surprise was that there would be no final surprise, just an eternal unfolding of human greatness, one overlooked person at a time. In the evening breeze that rustled through the memorial garden, Marcus could almost hear Eleanor's voice, carried on the wind to every corner of the earth, where her successors were discovering that ordinary people were capable of extraordinary things. "Well done, my dear children. Now keep going. The best is yet to come."
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.